Welcome to the Solo Mo Show, where we will cover current stories and topics related to how businesses and organizations are using social media, location-based services, and mobile technology in interesting ways. I'm Corey O'Brien, a social media strategist at Heat and author of thefutureofads.com.
And I'm Adam Helway, the CEO of digital marketing agency Secret Sushi Creative. And how you doing, Corey?
Doing well. How about yourself, Adam?
I'm doing okay. It's just after the first week of the new year here, supposedly the last year of our lives, 2012.
Better make it worth it.
Yeah, exactly. So we figured, why don't we do a podcast? Worst case scenario, nobody will listen to it next year, right?
There you go.
So this is our first episode of the Solo Mo Show, and we hope to have many more shows. Get some feedback from you guys in the audience, but we want to just get right down to some of our topics here. And the first thing I kind of wanted to talk about, Corey, before we get into some of our main points of discussion, is a study that Nielsen did. And Nielsen Research Group did a study about media consumption of U.S. residents. And there was a pretty extensive study, lots of fancy graphs and charts and things like that for the data hungry folks. But the thing that I found most interesting was the simultaneous usage area of the charts, where it's talking about what percentage of consumers were doing, what were they doing when they were simultaneously while they were watching TV and using some sort of device in their hands. And so just to kind of back up for 1 second, a lot of folks are, over the last couple of years, as mobile devices have become more and more prominent, they've started to use their devices simultaneously while watching their favorite TV show, or even watching movies at home, things like Netflix. And so do you do you watch a lot of TV at all?
I don't actually watch a lot of TV. I've played with some of these services. I tried out Into Now before Yahoo bought them. I've experimented a little bit, but typically I don't watch a lot of TV. So what I do, I'm focused on the show, and I'm not using a second screen yet for additional information. What about yourself, Adam? Do you use some of these applications?
Well, I do. I think probably about a year ago, the first thing that I was doing simultaneously was just using Twitter and checking out what people were saying on Twitter at the same time, because you could set up a search and just let it roll and then refresh the search during commercials and see what people were talking about. But some of the services like you were talking about have come out over the last year as well, that have been kind of very focused on creating discussions around what's going on TV. Like you mentioned Into Now, which was out for only like a month, and then ended up getting acquired by Yahoo, who obviously thinks that there's some promise behind that. And that's for the iPad and an iPhone, and probably for the Android as well. And then there's Get Glue, which happens to be the one that I use more frequently and really enjoy using. But, just to point it out, what was the most interesting is not that people were, not that a majority of people were using these services per se, but that they were doing other things. Like if we look at the study real quick, it says that upwards of 50-something, 60% were checking their email, and something around just slightly under that were just using their devices to surf the web for completely unrelated information to what they were watching. And then that's when we start hitting people who are using it for social networking and so on, and maybe Into Now and Get Glue can fall under that. But you're an advertising guy. You're a guy that likes, checking out some cool and innovative stuff that's going on with advertising. So right under the social networking, people were actually using their devices to learn more about the people on the programs, and even who some of the companies were and brands were advertising during the show. Do you ever use your device to like check out anything on imdb.com or something like that at all while you're watching a show or something?
Not personally, but I think it's interesting that that's a prominent behavior. I think we, as marketers, struggle to realize if we're actually making an impact on consumers. Are they seeing an ad and going to look at our products? So it's interesting to see that not only are some of these consumers being impacted by the commercials, but they're actually being impacted to the point where they're looking at the moment that they're seeing the commercial. And it makes me wonder if advertisers are going to start to take advantage of that. So we're already seeing TV shows that have selected their own hashtag and put that over top of the TV show. I wonder if that's going to start to exist in commercials and advertising as well, where some of these advertisers are going to try to aggregate conversation around the ads during live TV and actually turn it into more of an ad-based event.
I'd be really curious to find out when it comes to using their devices to look up information about these products or services, or even, as it says in the study, about coupons or deals related to an ad that they saw on TV, like what that means specifically. You know, how many folks are looking up, like we've seen a lot of car commercials and other commercials where they tell you to go to YouTube, for instance, to submit a video or to watch kind of additional footage that they've added to some branding that they've had during a commercial. But I'd wonder what other interesting things are happening around that. And the whole idea of having a hashtag during a commercial is an interesting topic.
Yeah, and we're seeing, already things like Shazam are trying to bridge that gap between the consumer that's watching it on TV and wants to find out additional information online. So there's definitely some potential there, and companies are trying to ease that process. So, whether it's Into Now starting to automatically tag the commercials that are part of live TV, or Shazam, a lot of tools are starting to become available for advertisers to utilize, which definitely is kind of a sign of the results that Nielsen's seeing. I think they're definitely related.
Well, let's go ahead and get on to our other topics that we have. There's some really cool stuff that's happened here recently. We're trying to cover things that have happened within the last couple weeks. The first one you brought up. Now, can you share with us what that is, our number one topic?
Sure, and this was actually kind of a late breaking news. This was the day that we decided to record this. Google decided to release what they're calling Search Plus Your World, which is integrating, according to their blog post, it's integrating your entire world, including your online social life, into their Google search results. But really what the first round of that is integrating Google Plus data into search results. And so this caused a lot of uproar, especially, Twitter made a response saying that they felt it was not in users' best interest, and that it wasn't, promoting an open web to be so selective of their own properties. I thought it was definitely interesting, the potential effect this could have on search results. Obviously, anyone who's involved in search marketing is very, very aware of the moves that Google's making, and they're using some of that leverage to promote their social channel. The general idea is that if you're running a search through Google, it will actually look inside of the circles that you have established through Google, and it'll say, hey, these results are related to what you're looking for, but potentially more interesting because they're from people that you are directly connected to. So,
in essence, social. They're trying to say that they're integrating social in with it, but people's social profiles have gone far beyond Google Plus for a long, long time, right? You've got LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, and any other one of these niche social networks that people have been a part of for quite some time, and Google Plus is quite new, and they call it social, and that they're bringing results that are relevant based on social, but for the most part, it's really related. It's revolving around Google Plus more than anything. Right?
Yeah, exactly. It's, myself, I'm a photographer, and for a long time I was posting a lot of my photos to Flickr, and the only real photos that they're bringing in now are those that are either posted to Picasa or directly to Google Plus. And so myself, having not yet made that transition to transferring over all of my photos into Google Plus, it's not going to pull up those results when my friends search for things that I might have taken pictures of. Even though I've taken a lot of pictures of things, I've posted them online. Photography is now part of my online social existence. According to Google, it's not part of my social world. So
now the biggest kind of reason that this is important, right, is because this is not just a network like Google Plus where people go and it's unrelated to maybe some more popular service or tool out there on the web specifically to Google, related to Google. But Google's search page is like one of its most powerful tools. It's a place where millions of people go, mainstream users go there, people that don't really care about Google Plus potentially, and they're just using it as a way of searching and finding information. And I think that's why this has such a big impact, and why some people are a little bit concerned. Do you share the same concerns though? I'll share my perspective on that in a second. But you were mentioning how, for instance, Twitter feels about that. What are your thoughts on it?
I do think it's a little concerning, but it's something that, it's so early on. We really haven't seen the ramifications of this. We don't know if Google's going to kind of succumb to pressure and integrate other social data. I know that they have access to it. So inside of my Google Plus profile, I've put all these other links, and whether or not they choose to spider those and grab some of that data is kind of up to them. And I could see that being a response to some of the feedback that they've received already. I think what we're definitely going to see is brands starting to push their own Google Plus page, because suddenly if you can get someone to add your brand into a circle and then they do search results, they're more likely to see a result from your own brand versus a competitor's brand that might not be taking as strong of a stance to really build up a Google Plus network. And I think that has huge implications for the way that marketers approach their social strategy, less so from a community building and more from a search engine optimization angle.
Yeah, I think that's an important point. Is it's not just how the changes will impact you straight away, but how is it going to influence people with their marketing, and whether or not they're going to jump and start using Google Plus more, for instance. They were bringing up, if you wanted to find a person, if I wanted to find Corey O'Brien on Google, then I'm likely to actually start seeing his Google Plus profile pop up first. I did take a look at some of the functionality of it and what they were doing, and they do, to their defense, have a kind of a toggle switch on there. So if you want to see things as you would normally see it, that's how it's going to be by default. And you could also switch it and see what your social results are on the other side. I kind of am a little bit worried, because I think search is an important thing, right? And Google has been the top dog for quite some time. I think over 60 or 70% market share in that regard. But when they start to intersperse all these other kind of custom and personalized aspects, it gets a little hard for us that deal with marketing to kind of predictably understand the best way to help our clients get content that's going to rise to the top in a predictable fashion. Eventually you learn about all these little tweaks and kind of leverage what we know of those tweaks. But that's the thing for me, is just trying to understand and grab a hold of all these changes, so that you can explain to somebody when they see a result, it's different than when a friend of theirs sees a result, or somebody else that works for their company sees a result. I understand Twitter's issues with it, even though when you dig deeper, you find out that there's some political things going on between Twitter and Google. Because I would really love to see all of that stuff. If anybody had a chance previously, before it was removed, to see Twitter's data in the Google stream, it was actually quite useful. In fact, it was more useful on Google to search back through than it was on Twitter.
Yeah.
Because on Twitter, you got to see 2 weeks or 3 weeks maximum. On Google, you could see a lot more, and you could kind of see a beat and a buzz, charts and things like that of what was going on during that time. So it'll be really interesting, because this just happened today, like you said. We'll give it some time and see what people think about it. For those who could care less about Google Plus, it might be a little bit confusing,
right?
Or maybe it's not, because I'm sure Google might have potentially thought about that ahead of time.
Yeah, and I think, even as we speak, we've seen kind of Twitter make an initial response, and we've seen Google even respond to that. So this is an ongoing story, and something that we should probably revisit at a future podcast and see how it's evolved, because I think on a day-by-day basis, we're really learning more about Google's strategy and how it's going to play out and how it's going to affect other marketing strategies. So.
And I guess the takeaway from it is that Google is going to make Google Plus matter for those who care about Google Plus because it's a social network, and those who care about using Google because it's a search engine, and that's where they bring which a lot of people get traffic from that, obviously, right?
Right.
And so those who care about traffic and SEO and those things that came way before any of these social networks, Google Plus, I mean, excuse me, the this new Google Search Plus is going to be something that they need to keep an eye on.
Definitely.
What is our second topic? Because we just can't get enough of Google for today, I guess.
So the second topic we were going to talk about is the Google Chrome sponsored post campaign. Now, this was a story that was actually broke by SearchEngineLand.com, and what they found out was that Google was using a third-party agency to essentially promote Google Chrome. And that third-party agency put a program in place where they were contacting influential bloggers and essentially paying them to talk about Google Chrome. And Google's rules that they put in place to kind of control the way that brands affect their search engine marketing is that you can't pay someone to put a link to your site. So via a third-party agency, Google is essentially breaking its own rules and paying bloggers to promote Chrome. And this broke over the holidays, and the story came out, and it actually took a while for Google to respond to this. It seems like the people who would have responded were on break, and maybe they just didn't get a chance to. But really interesting to see the back and forth that happened with Google trying to distance themselves a little bit and say, hey, we worked with this agency, but we didn't really understand all of what they were going to do in terms of promoting Google Chrome, and this isn't something that we would have signed off on had we been aware of exactly what they were doing. But hard to deny the fact that there were a lot of posts out there pointing to Google Chrome that some of them were very explicit about the fact that they were paid, some of them less so. I think we saw Google admit the fact that yes, this is a serious issue when they penalized Google Chrome inside of search results. So if you now search for a browser, they've bumped Google Chrome down in the rankings a little bit,
which is pretty funny.
Which is pretty funny, but that's how they've dealt with the issue with similar companies in the past. So they had to kind of live by that rule and punish themselves for this action, even though they're trying to push the blame off a little bit onto this other agency.
Well, and it happened before for obviously somebody other than Google, and that's why this kind of resurfaces in this way. The JCPenney's had that issue. I don't remember what it was, maybe a year ago, and they found out that the agency that they were using, I think, was seeding tons and tons of websites with everything from like little black dress to a bunch of other apparel niche keywords and so on. And so they were essentially earning millions and millions of dollars from all this traffic. And then I think it might have been Matt Cutts from Google, who deals with the spam and a lot of the other stuff related to that topic over at Google, wrote a pretty good article about how they got penalized once they discovered. And JCPenney did the same thing, the whole hands-off thing of, oh, well, we didn't know, we're sorry. And suddenly their search traffic, their ranking dropped quite a bit. And that impacts the bottom line for them, a lot. But
Sure.
It's interesting to see Google do it to themselves.
Yeah. And I think, this combined with what we're seeing with Google Plus affecting search is obviously a very powerful and important thing for marketers to pay attention to. And like you mentioned with JCPenney, it could eventually affect millions of dollars of sales. So it's something that a lot of companies pay very close attention to and are always working to improve their rankings. Even bumping up a couple of places in a search result could result in tens of thousands of additional visits to a website. So things like this, things like Google Plus, we're kind of seeing search unravel a little bit, in that it used to be very clear what resulted in getting a higher placement on a search result, but now you're kind of wondering, well, if I can get 10 people to link to me in Google Plus, how is that going to help me? If I can get a couple of bloggers to link to me, how is that going to affect my search engine ranking? Because if Google themselves are going out and seeing the need to get blogs to link to them, than me as
What is that saying
as
to
a
the
small to
average
mid-sized company.
customer, right? Exactly.
Exactly. It's saying, well, if they're doing it to game their own system, then I have to game the system too. Otherwise, I'm getting passed by my competitors that are doing it, smarter and faster than I am. So I think it kind of points to the fact that, especially for marketers, Google feels like a bit of a wild west right now, and we're kind of grabbing at straws to see what's going to work in terms of helping search ranking.
Overall, what scares me the most in a way, or maybe not scared is the right word, but there's a lot of mainstream users, right? And mainstream users don't know about all this stuff. They don't care about the SEO. They don't care about Google Plus. What they care about is that Google to them is their homepage and their database, so to speak. They type what they're looking for into it, and they look for it. And so those that are less in the know are going to be using Google, and as these changes are happening beneath them, I'm a little afraid of things becoming a little bit too what's the right way to say it? The experience to get a little too jumbled for the average user. And then also things like a lot of the tools that they've, because what we're talking about is just two things that Google has, just kind of two topics related to Google and search, but they have made lots of changes over the last year, a year and a half, all kinds of incremental changes. I've seen a couple posts recently about like the 30 things they did last year, little tiny tweaks that have changed the way that things show up. And some of them are great. And some of them are things that concern me because it changes the information that the average person sees and potentially sways people in one direction or another. Where in the past, even though it gave you 10,000 or 100,000 results, they were just there, right? It was you started at the top of the stack and you kind of went through the top of the stack.
Yep.
So, anyways, well, it'll be interesting to see. I'm kind of bullish on Google Plus, and I'm kind of bullish on all the changes that Google has been making over the last year. So I'm going to pay attention to this stuff, but I don't want them to mess with search too much. I think you might feel similarly, that not just because of the marketing aspect, but I think also just I don't know.
I think it could definitely be. I mean, we could have a whole show on search, and we might at some point, but I think this could potentially signal, that Google has become a little complicated, and that it potentially opens.
That's a good word, complicated. Actually, I don't want it to become too complicated.
Right, and they started out, it was a page of 10 results, and you typically trusted those 10 results, and now they're trying to add a little bit more information in, which potentially opens the door for a competitor to come in and be a little simpler and be a little easier to use. And if that's the case, it'll be something that we'll need to pay attention to. So interesting changes in the search landscape, and a lot of different factors coming into play quickly. So something to keep an eye on.
Well, let's move from Google. We've talked that one to death, and talk about some food.
Let's talk about some pizza.
Some pizza. Go for it.
Sure. So Domino's, and I believe, as far as I understand, this was not in the U.S. This was a European initiative, but Domino's put out a series of billboards that were actually augmented reality billboards. So you're sitting at a bus stop, you look over, you see this Domino's billboard. You could pull out your phone, open up the Dominos app, and you could actually scan that billboard, and out of the billboard would grow this sort of interactive menu. And then from that menu, you could build your own pizza. You could send that pizza to your local store, and then you could actually go and have that pizza delivered to you. And it was using location to say, this is where this billboard is located. The nearest pizza place is 2 miles from you. Here's the address, and if you go ahead and let us know your address, by the time you get home, we'll have a hot pizza waiting for you outside. So a really interesting combination of local data, outdoor advertising, augmented reality, mobile apps. It's sort of all come together into one experience for the consumer. I don't know if it's too advanced for the consumer at this point. I mean, I think it's asking a lot of someone to have a Domino's app, understand how to open up this augmented reality experience, then interact with it and actually order a pizza through it while you're sort of trying to point your phone at this experience. But at least they're not afraid to push the edge a little bit and be known as a brand that's kind of experimenting and seeing what works in a lot of these areas.
Yeah, and I agree with you on whether it might be too advanced for folks or not. But in taking a look at the article, it says that they're doing it at 6,000 different sites across Britain,
Hmm.
and 6,000 is a lot. I
Sure.
mean, I don't know if from the photo it looks like they're bus sites or bus stops or something like that. Something could be a not park benches, but bus stop benches, and the what do they call them, the little shelters that they have at the bus stops and so on.
Yep.
And like you said too, there's a few steps people have to go through. They have to actually download the application. I've talked with people in the past who have thought it would be great to develop an application to do to market something in their business, not realizing that it's one thing to have something available on the web that's accessible via a built-in app, which is essentially your browser. It's another thing to try to coax people to then first go and actually download some sort of application and put it on at first.
Right.
But if they're able to do it, that's a big plus, because now they've coaxed people to actually having the Domino's app on their phone.
Yep.
And there's no telling what kind of stuff they could push to there, and how they can continue to engage with people. It says that how they got a lot of confidence, I guess, to try the augmented reality, which is still not very popular or well known around the world, because they had some success with QR codes, which is kind of another thing that is taking a little while to gain some speed.
Hmm.
But I'd like to know what they consider success. But if they liked the fact they're using QR codes, which is another kind of location based mobile technology, that they took it up a notch with the augmented reality. So it sounds like they're willing to experiment,
Yep.
which is really, really awesome, because there's not a lot of big brands that are doing that out there. I really like the augmented reality possibilities.
Hmm.
In fact, I think that with location-based technology and mobile, we are actually layering a lot of location-based data across our local areas around the world, to a point where in the future it's going to be really interesting to see how we can use our mobile devices to view this data almost like a layer on top. Like, really, it's an augmented layer on top of the entire world.
Yep.
And I know you like location-based stuff quite a bit as well, right?
I do, and what I like about this campaign in particular is they've already got a mobile app that they've provided to customers to order pizza from. So it's not just an experience that you're downloading to kind of interact with a marketing experience. It has a real function to the users. It has a real added value for someone to take the steps involved in downloading an app, learning how to use that interface. So it's not just saying, hey, we want you to go through this huge process so that you can play with our billboard. It's actually giving users something to ease the process of ordering a pizza from Domino's. I also like the fact that because it's augmented reality, that billboard still functions as a billboard if you don't have a mobile phone or you don't have the time to interact with it. It's not like it's a QR code where a lot of the experience is hidden behind the ad, and if you're not part of that, the in crowd that knows how to use a QR code, knows how to access that information, you can't get a lot of value out of that ad. With this ad, it's still a billboard. It's still serving its main function. It's just providing additional value for someone that does know how to kind of unlock that experience, how to interact with it. So
That's an interesting way to look at it, actually.
Smart experimentation. It's taking something that's going to work anyways. They're going to be doing billboards and adding on an additional layer that allows them to test something, allows them to get additional data, but it doesn't take away the primary function of their outdoor advertising.
Yeah, like a QR code, of course, you don't see QR codes usually by themselves.
Mm-hmm.
You see them tacked onto another ad because it's wasted space just to have this big QR code that may or may not get used. People look at it and there's absolutely no value to just staring at a QR code. But if you've got a mobile device, you can access that information. And so that's quite interesting to think about that this is a way to double up on space. You can have interactivity in the real world and still have display advertising that acts as display advertising for those who are not, with the in crowd.
Right.
And so very, very cool. I'll be looking forward to see if they do something like that here in the U.S. I don't know if I'd order a pizza just wandering around and seeing this advertisement and go, hey, I feel like ordering a pizza now.
Right.
I mean, normally something like that is primarily to create awareness,
mm-hmm.
and not to create a purchase,
Right.
not to initiate a purchase. But maybe, that's why it's at bus stops. Maybe you're sitting there and it's like, hey, these guys are going maybe home.
Yep.
Why don't you order a pizza before you go home?
Yeah.
So that's really, really cool. On to the next.
Yeah, let's do it.
More food.
Continuing the food theme, exactly. So, Doritos is apparently revisiting their idea that they had last year, which hopefully means they saw some success with it. But they're doing what they're calling Crash the Super Bowl. And essentially what this is getting user-generated advertisements that then their community votes on to select one, and the winner gets played during the Super Bowl and also gets the chance to kind of work directly with Doritos to produce an additional spot. It's my understanding that they're going to allow the winner to work with Lonely Island, so that gives them a little bit of, celebrity angle and some street cred. But what, after giving an initial look through some of the spots, I was, I guess the thing that came across as well, these are obviously amateur spots. These are computer or consumer generated spots. Is that an effective strategy? It was last year when it was kind of new and novel, but are people tired of the idea yet? Is it going to work for them like it did last year? So it'll be interesting to see, the response that these ads get, and the one that ultimately plays during the Super Bowl. It'll be interesting to see how that tests against the other spots.
I haven't been able to see the videos yet. I did see some of them last year, and they could have been done professionally. I don't necessarily think that those looked kind of, they didn't look user generated completely. The ones last year had quite a bit of polish. The interesting thing is that they're crowdsourcing this, right? So
Right.
We're seeing like 5 finalists, so to speak, but they might have had thousands of submissions. I don't know. They probably had a few hundred submissions, and most of them were recorded bad and all that. But I think there's a couple things to point out. How one, obviously they're crowdsourcing this, and so they're looking through all this user-generated content, and which they don't have to generate. They just ask for it. They put up a prize and say, create a commercial that'll be interesting. So they don't have to deal with the creative, and they can pick and choose. And in fact, they could pick more than one if they wanted to. It's completely up to them. Just because one group wins during the Super Bowl and gets to be aired during the Super Bowl doesn't mean that the other ones aren't going to get some visibility. In fact, I'm looking at the article here, and there's 5 of them up there, and
Right.
that means on YouTube there's hundreds of them potentially up there as submissions.
Right.
So rather than waiting until the day of the Super Bowl where these commercials for Doritos is unveiled, there's this kind of trail of somewhat okay videos and some really great videos promoting Doritos all over the web.
Yep.
It probably increases the SEO to some extent. There's a little bit of a buzz going on because of that. And the other thing is related to the user-generated content. Even if some of the videos have lean in the direction of, somebody getting smacked between the legs with a baseball bat, or a real kind of user-generated video that you would find online that would just kind of make you laugh. We've grown kind of accustomed to user-generated content.
Yep.
So even if the spot isn't 100% polished, if it's entertaining and funny and kind of connects with us, it's still okay.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It doesn't need to be done completely professionally, but in most cases, at least from what I remember last year, it seemed like many of the ones that did end up winning definitely were created by people who somehow it looks like they had experience in the field.
Right. These are not amateurs with a flip cam. These
Yeah,
are
yeah.
people with-
It looks like pros, or people that do it as a side job or something like that.
Yep.
With an ad agency potentially or something.
And it's funny that you mentioned last year's spots, because the winning spot last year featured animals, which is, obviously it's something that people are passionate about online.
Cats?
I think it had cats.
Oh, right.
I'll go ahead and say that it had cats, but I know it was some sort of animal. And so we actually see that, people learning the lesson from last year. And so 3 out of the finalists this year feature animals again, kind of relying on, it's that cute factor. It's animals. It's what we know the online audience is going to vote for. The 4th one had a baby, so everybody loves babies. It's really interesting to see the general...
Taking all the memes that are online and just saying, hey, people love videos with babies and animals and that kind of stuff, huh?
Right, and you end up with videos that speak well to an online audience, and the question is, will they resonate as well with a TV audience that is not necessarily as infatuated with the latest cat video or that type of content.
It's almost a blending, the way you made it sound there, where you say, this is how online, this type of content online audiences are used to seeing. And really, right, people who are online audiences is the same as TV audiences in most cases.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people have seen YouTube, but this kind of blending of what would normally be primarily acceptable on America's Funniest Home Videos and online on YouTube only can now kind of bleed into this aesthetic that is on the most expensive and most viewed commercial spot in the whole world during the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
So that's an really interesting way to look at it, and we'll be interested to find out what goes on, especially if the Niners are in the Super Bowl. So
there you go. Yeah.
So we're on to our last and final topic, and this one I think is quite interesting, and I'll lead in with it here. There was an article that was out regarding Obama joining Instagram. So Instagram is a popular mobile photo social network revolving around photography with your iPhone and so on. It's not available on the web. It's strictly available on your iPhone, actually, not even on your Android just yet. It's going to be on the Android in a little while, but it's grown in popularity, and Obama, I guess, has joined it recently. And the article covered also a number of major news outlets that were using Instagram kind of to show behind the scenes snapshots of what was going on during the campaign time and things leading up to the 2012 election, which is barely just starting to heat up over the last couple months. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. To me, I think it's really interesting that we take a president who arguably won his presidency off of his savvy and success with using social media and technology and so on 4 years ago.
Yep.
And that the 4 years have evolved quite a bit in regards to, Facebook has come a long way in 4 years. I mean, how many times during the year have we seen Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn have town hall meetings, and the president has actually come to I think Facebook headquarters, for instance, and done some stuff. But social and mobile and all these sites and networks have evolved so much, and Instagram wasn't even around in a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
Now it's out. It's gaining in popularity. It still has a long way to go, quite honestly. It's not in the realm of a Twitter or something like that just yet in regards to its user base.
Mm-hmm.
But now Obama suddenly dives in and says, hey, I think there's some value in that. Or at least, the folks helping him out with the social media stuff.
Yeah.
So I think it's a little interesting that it almost, in a way, not validates Instagram, but validates Instagram. Like
Yeah.
it tells people like, hey, well, look, he's I mean, why not Flickr?
Yeah.
Right, because Flickr doesn't have the same kind of attraction that it has for something like this, which is like a real social network, right? Flickr is where you go and you show your photos, and it's primarily photogs, people that are really into photography who just want to put their work up there and so on.
Yep.
Whereas Instagram is more just there's some beautiful photography on there, some really great looking stuff, but people are actually just kind of connecting to those that they know on Facebook and Twitter on there because it supports those networks as a place to share your content and as a way to discover who's on there. But it's an actual social network, right? It feels like social. There's comments and there's likes on there.
Yeah.
So it's interesting both in the case of Obama just using it, period, and how he's identified that, and now Instagram again as it kind of comes to the forefront and has gained in popularity, that it is the place that he chose to jump on there. Why not Pinterest? You know what I mean?
Obama's top 10 dresses of 2012 brought to you by Pinterest.
So I mean, you before we started recording, you had some interesting feedback on what you thought about that subject.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting because Instagram right now is, I think it's being used because it provides a feeling of direct access. So 4 years ago, Twitter filled that role, and people felt like, I'm following Obama's tweets. I feel like I have direct access to Obama. I feel like I'm getting the most current news, the most current thoughts, the most current updates, and you felt part of the campaign. And so I can see why this jump to Instagram is sort of 2012's version of that direct access. It's, when somebody posts a picture to Instagram, it was typically taken 10 seconds prior, a filter gets applied, and suddenly it's live on the web for everyone else to see. So you're kind of going along for the ride. The thing that frustrates me about it, though, is it takes Obama and removes him from the role of president and reminds us that suddenly he's now, candidate first, president second. It feels like something that he took up and took interest in because there's an election coming up. He, understands the value that it has in terms of attracting new voters. But, where was he, a couple months back when Instagram had, 10 million users? It's not like this was an unknown network, but it definitely feels not like, hey, here's this way to access the president. It feels like here's a way to access a 2012 presidential candidate. So, I think we saw last election with Twitter, it seemed like he was posting a lot of his own updates, and then as soon as he actually won the election and became president, most of the updates
silent a bit.
He went silent a bit. Most of the updates were posted by aides, and I understand that there's a lot more restriction placed on a president that aren't placed on candidates, but it makes me wonder if we're going to see the same thing with Instagram. Is there going to be a whole collection of photos posted up until the point that he wins a re-election or doesn't win a re-election, and then suddenly that channel goes silent again, and it's kind of on to the next thing. So I would love to see it be a tool that gets continued use, but I just, judging by the way that we saw Twitter kind of drop off suddenly, I'm not sure if that's going to be the case this year.
Yeah, and there's a few other candidates that I think are using it, or at least they've been shot. A photo of them have been shot by somebody and put on Instagram. They were showing in this particular article and in some follow-up articles that I saw. And this is actually there's kind of a short blurb about this on Instagram's blog, so you can check it out there. But it kind of is related to, there was there was the first caucus event last week, I think it was. And they had an infographic that was showing kind of the social media breakdown from all of the Republican candidates. Mm-hmm. And it was really interesting to see how the activity spiked and over what days that it spiked and in what channels that it spiked and so on. For instance, Ron Paul happens to get a lot of attention on YouTube.
Yep.
I think just, a lot of what he has to say, it's up there and people kind of gravitate towards it and have all these discussions on the comments, those kinds of really volatile YouTube comments. But they have, there's a lot of discussion going on over there, which is good, by principle. But they were showing also how, for instance, the social media activity didn't translate 100% into, and by no means actually not 100%, not 90%, but not at all exactly into votes. Because, they showed what would happen with the primary, with Mitt Romney and so on. But it was very interesting to see how they kind of equated that back to whether or not it meant anything overall when it came to the votes. And I think in the grand scheme of things, Obama kind of took everybody by surprise 4 years ago because he really effectively used social media. And it was kind of like after the fact that John McCain and some of the other folks during the primaries and everything were saying, oh, shoot, he's doing the social media thing and seems to be getting a lot of attention. How are we going to go ahead and use this? And they couldn't grasp it and get it quick enough to make the kind of impact that Obama did. This year, people have had 4 years to plan, right? And so it'll be interesting to see how other folks jump on that, the bandwagon, so to speak, for that, and are active, like you said, more during the campaign trail, and probably will end up dropping off throughout the year. And is that an acceptable thing to stop being active in the social media space throughout the year? I mean, Obama may not have been busy on Twitter, but he did put out, his videos on YouTube, and he had a blog and all that. Yeah. I think there was a lot more that could be had with those channels.
Yeah. Well, I think to bring it, back to marketing a little bit, The relation that I see to the way that a brand should approach a network is, you know, if you're say launching a product, it's hard to both launch a marketing initiative or launch a marketing channel, build up an audience, and then promote the your product with that channel. So, had Obama been on Instagram for the last 6 months, he would have already established an audience. He would have already, established the fact that, hey, I'm posting a lot of these updates, and it becomes easier then to push a specific message because you've already gone through the legwork of building that channel up. So, as a brand, if you're looking to launch a product, that period isn't the time that you want to say, hey, let's start up an Instagram program. You want 6 months prior to have started the Instagram program, got your feet wet, got familiar with what works, what doesn't, learned how to comment, learned how to like photos. And then when it comes time to actually push your product, you are familiar with what's going to work. You've got that audience built up, and now you can actually use the tool, to promote your product or to promote your brand versus trying to both build your audience and then get that audience to take the action that you're hoping that they take.
I mean, I think his timing is okay, right?
Mm-hmm.
Considering the fact that he doesn't have to run out and compete with other Democrats to get elected at the moment. So at any rate, it will be interesting to see how he uses Instagram, if it'll have any sort of impact at all, because I'd be interested to see if he's actually sharing, for instance, those photos. I mean, maybe that's part of the reason why he also likes Instagram is he can take those photos, and those photos with one shot can be syndicated, cross posted on other networks.
Yep.
And those networks are places where he's already quite active.
Yeah.
So we'll see how that goes. So with that note, we are ready to do our final wrap up here. You want to head that off, Corey?
Sure. First off, I want to thank the audience, especially those listening to what ultimately is our first episode. So we're getting a feel for the process here. We're trying to figure out what works, and because of that, we'd love any feedback that you have. You can reach me on Twitter. I'm at Corey O'Brien. You can reach Adam. I'm sure the same.
You can't reach me at Corey O'Brien, but you can reach me at Secret Sushi.
There you go.
And we're both on Google Plus. So
speaking of Google Plus, we are both on there, both actively trying to figure that network out and build up our own profile there. So feel free to submit questions through either one of those channels.
Feel free to submit some topics that you're interested in having us talk about. What we're trying to do is, as you can see, we're trying to address specific kind of posts that have some really cool stories that are behind them, and kind of branch off on those topics related to those posts and those events that are happening throughout the week just before the show. And we hope to do things like some interviews and other things. But on that note, again, thank you guys for listening. And you can actually find us. What's the web address that we grabbed?
solomoshow.com. That will forward you to the correct address.
And if you listen to the topics, you should understand what Solo Mo Show is, what Solo Mo is. But feel free to ask us if not. And on with that, and maybe we hope to get a Twitter account. Probably by the time we post this, we'll get a Twitter account for the show, and that way we can share it there and get people to follow us. So on that note, I'm Adam Helway.
And I'm Corey O'Brien.
And thanks for listening to the Solo Mo Show, and have a good day.